Welcome to this presentation. Knowledge about language, or KAL for short, refers to the linguistic content that language teachers are expected to be able to articulate or declare. KAL is declarative knowledge, which is also known as information. KAL informs what materials, tasks and assignments are best suited to students according to their global literacy skills and their syntactic development. KAL is core to the everyday work of language teachers. An essential KAL framework is the hierarchy of language, which we will explore here. So these are the general elements that we include in a hierarchy of language. It's not the only hierarchy of language in the world, but this is the one that serves our purposes very well. Note that letter here refers to alphabetic letters, not a mode of correspondence. Phrases and clauses are both groups of words. In this context, a clause is a group of words that contains a finite verb. A phrase doesn't have a finite verb, as you can see in these examples. The word phrase is used in many ways, but in the hierarchy of language, this is how it's used. And text, this refers to both spoken and written language. When we are describing sentences, we can identify them as simple, compound, complex. And morphemes are components of words such as stem, prefix, and suffix. And there are many things to say about words, but let's just start with words as single or multi-word units. So, it starts with the smaller units of language at the bottom. Can you move these in your mind's eye into position? Remember, the smallest unit at the bottom and the biggest at the top. How long do you need? It brings us to this, obviously. With the arrows pointing upwards, this is a bottom-up view of language. In the process of learning language from language, we need a top-down view of language as well, as we shall soon see. Many linguistic concepts can be found at every level of the hierarchy of language, and we can refer to these linguistic concepts using terminology. The language we use to talk about language is metalanguage. Now, you know that frisson of delight when you learn a new word? A few days ago, someone on the BBC not only used the term commander's intent, but explained it, expecting that viewers would not know it. It went straight into my mind. I had just read Rutger Bregnen's Humankind and was partway through Dan Gretton's I, You, We, Them. In both of these books, this concept is referred to, but not by this name. And then a few days ago, a friend of mine expressed his delight at now understanding the difference between adverb and adverbial. This sort of new input is like an adolescent's growth spurt. At first, a little bit unsettling. Your thinking is destabilized. You then reconcile the old and the new as your understanding of the world realigns. Your expanding mind is even better prepared to deal with the next set of chance encounters. It also happens that you meet new information which you cannot reconcile. You cannot accept. It is possible to hold contradictory opinions at the same time. This is referred to as ambivalence. If you experience some friction or discomfort from this, it is referred to as cognitive dissonance. These are both useful terms to describe an aspect of the world. As we've just discussed, metalanguage is language about language. The terms we use to label aspects of language. They are the most important essential aspect of a teacher's KAL, knowledge about language. It always feels strange to me when I have to defend the promotion of metalanguage in vocabulary teaching. Students of sport expect to learn about physiology and nutrition, and students of photography learn about light and colour and form. Students develop their skills and knowledge of their field through terminology, whether in a first or a second language. In language teaching, teachers and textbooks directly teach dozens of grammar concepts, many of which are abstract and almost indigestible, and they all have well-known labels such as those that can be seen on the left. Conversely, there is little expectation that students could benefit from or handle lexical terms such as those on the right. Such an attitude underestimates students and stunts their growth. Not a good thing. Let's have a look now at some of these terms as they align with the hierarchy of language. Every element of language that we're about to see is its own teaching topic, and none of them are taught in isolation from some of the others, and none of them are taught all at once. They're introduced and recycled and developed across the long trajectory of the student's language learning. And some of them are not taught. Syllabuses and course books don't introduce them. And some of them are simply acquired. They emerge through the student's extensive exposure to the language. And now on the next slide, these elements of language will be grouped into the 7 elements of the hierarchy of language. So now we have them in the groups that match the levels. Can you see which set goes with which level? So here we have it. We have lexical cohesion and grammatical cohesion at the text level. We have things to do with the verb, especially tense, aspect, modality, related to the clause. In terms of phrases, we have things like word-based cultural references and functional language, functional phrases. When we're making sentences, we're dealing with conjuncts, words and phrases, and conjunctions, relative pronouns, etc. With morphemes, we're talking about things that make the comparative and superlative, adjective, adverbs, prefixes and suffixes. With words, we've got such properties of words as collocation, connotation, colligation, etc. And with letters, we have such things as spelling and the variations between US and UK spelling conventions. So we can see that the hierarchy is like this giant coat hanger on which we neatly position many aspects of language. It can help teachers structure our teaching, and it helps students to structure their learning. It can also help us define the limits of grammar. Grammar can be seen like some great amorphous mass of rules and terms, with many more elements of language than we've seen on previous slides. In fact, it might even seem like everything under the sun could be counted as grammar. Grammar might be considered as everything under the sun, but everything under this sun. From morpheme to the sentence level, grammar is not without limits. Grammar is an abstract set of rules that covers morphology and syntax. Morphology concerns the forms and structure of words. Syntax concerns the arrangement of words and morphemes in a sentence. This is how we arrive at the lovely term morphosyntax. We can take this one step further. We can say that morphology looks at words within and syntax looks at words without. Then we might even go so far as to say that vocabulary equals grammar. There are plenty of linguists who argue that grammar is a set of generalizations over the lexicon. What can we do with all of this? Does this have any practical application? I believe it does. When teachers introduce a new language feature, We empower our students to do something that they couldn't do before. We teach and they learn about the use of can with verbs of perception, for example, and which suffixes we use to make nouns from adjectives, and the use of relative pronouns to make complex sentences, and we understand the importance of intonation in question tags. Teachers introduce hundreds of things, and most of them have labels or terms, like the ones we've been looking at. When we attach them to the hierarchy of language, we can see how they are empowering students. We ask students to think about their learning. We ask them, what have we just been learning? Good. So where does this belong in our hierarchy of language? Yes, very good. We've got quite a few ways of thinking about forming clauses now, haven't we? That's good, because we're now going to find some more examples of this in today's text, and then you are going to write your own. That's pretty cool. Also, many students appreciate order. They like to know where in the scheme of things new things belong, or where we are on the map. Some students also want to look into things in more detail themselves, perhaps find some online information and exercises. They need to know what to search for. Or perhaps they're creating pages in their learning journals for specific things. They need to know. Teachers often say that they wish their students would become more independent or more autonomous. Teachers can make that wish come true. Provide students with knowledge structures that the students can fill in with more examples of language features. Empower them to make observations. Let them put two and two together. Working from the top, text. We are in our skills zone. Students are performing the acts of reading and writing and speaking and listening. When we are doing the 4 skills, we are working at the text level of the hierarchy. All texts represent a genre, such as narration, anecdote, report, explanation, and all texts involve registers. Text might be spoken or written, communicated to people you know well or not at all, on topics such as postal service or current affairs or love and romance. So that our students get better at the skills, we teach them more of the systems. The lowest 3 items in the hierarchy of language are what we teach about vocabulary. The middle ground covers grammar, and we introduce functional language into the mix when we teach students to make sentences and combine them into text. Functional language is in many ways dependent on register and genre. And these 3 systems all involve pronunciation. The pronunciations of words and chunks, intonation and rhythm, declarative and imperative sentences, etc., etc. The hierarchy of language is a simple, flexible, and effective way to conceptualize language. It is one of the tools in teachers' knowledge about language that we use to make learning visible.